Hello, welcome to the Bible Standard. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment in the comments area if you have any questions. We'll do our best to reply.
We're going to have a look at this subject, Russia-Iran axis and Bible prophecy. And when we look at the world today, no one's surprised that we might be reflecting on a Russia-Iran axis. What you might be surprised to hear is that the very confederation of the nations that we're seeing today, the likes of Russia and Iran working closely together, is actually predicted in the Bible over 2,500 years ago. So the Bible said at the time of the end, you'll see these nations, Russia and Iran, closely connected. And we just read from Ezekiel chapter 38 that Russia with Iran, and you might think, well, I didn't see Russia there, and I didn't see Iran there. We'll pick that out later. But those two nations are spoken about coming against Israel, and particularly against the mountains of Israel. And so that's what we'd like to reflect on this morning. I mean, you might think, well, are you sure about that? This is from 2023. And look what the article says. It's past time to counter the growing Iran-Russia axis. This is something the whole world is interested in, is looking at. But we're able to look at it through the lens of Bible prophecy. Now, you've got your Bibles open, I think. I'd like you to come to the next prophet, Daniel. So you might be in Ezekiel. We just read from Ezekiel 38. But I'd like you to come to Daniel. And I'd like you to come first to Daniel chapter 2, where we read, well, what seems to be a crazy Sunday school story, where a man has a dream. The most powerful man in the world at the time, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he dreamt of a great image, and the dream frightened him to death. And so he said to all his wise men in Babylon, someone tell me what I dreamt and what the dream was about. And of course they couldn't do it, because how can you tell someone what they dreamt? But Daniel was given the dream by God and was given the interpretation. And he told Nebuchadnezzar what he dreamt and what his dream meant. So, if you're in Daniel chapter 2, you can see that the dream he has is that he sees this image and the head is of gold, all right? So he sees this image of a head of gold. Verse 31, you, O king, were watching a great image. This great image whose splendor was excellent stood before you. The image's head was of gold, chest and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And then you saw a stone cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. So we then learn that stone becomes a mountain at the end of verse 35 that ultimately fills the whole earth. So this king is troubled by it. And Daniel tells him what it means. He says to him, listen, King Nebuchadnezzar, verse 37, you're the king of kings, but you're not going to be like this king forever. Look, the end of verse 38. You are the head of gold. But after you, verse 39, another kingdom is going to come. And after that, another kingdom. And after that, another kingdom. And so he's told about the great empires of the world. Now, we're able to easily understand who these empires are, because actually in the book of Daniel, we go on to learn about them. So after the Babylonians came the Medes and the Persians. So in Daniel chapter 5, Babylon falls. Daniel chapter 6, there's a Medo-Persian king on the throne, Darius the Mede. And then after the Medes and Persians, the Greeks came in, and that's predicted too later in Daniel. In passages like Daniel chapter 11 or Daniel chapter 8, we see the Greek kingdom arise, led by the famous Greek king Alexander the Great. And after the Greeks came the Romans, and this is just basic history, isn't it? You know, the Greco-Roman world is what we see in Europe today, because the Romans came after the Greeks. And then we're told that after the Romans, the kingdom is going to be broken up of Rome. It will be part iron, part clay, partly strong nations, partly weak nations. Now, what's remarkable is that every aspect of that image seems to capture just brilliantly what happened with those empires. So first of all, you'll notice that silver is not as expensive, is it, as gold, because silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, was inferior. Look at verse 39. It's inferior. We notice that the chest and the arms, well, there are two arms, because there was a Medo-Persian Empire. Well, you might ask the question, well, why were there two legs then? Because there was only one Roman Empire. But some of you will know well that Rome split. Now, before I go to my next slide to show you Rome split, you might be wondering why there's a rabid-looking dog in the corner of my slide there. And if you look really carefully, well, it's not a rabid-looking dog. Actually, it's a great and dreadful beast. And that's because there's a parallel chapter in the Bible to Daniel 2, and that is Daniel chapter 7. And that's a dream that not a king of Babylon had, but Daniel himself had. And that dream shows even more detail. So instead of there being a head of gold, there's a lion with eagle's wings, which depicts the Babylonian Empire. And after that, there's a bear raised up on its side with 3 ribs in its mouth. And that depicts the Medo-Persian Empire. The 3 ribs are given to us in Jeremiah's prophecy. Then after that, we see a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, moving at great pace. Well, that depicts the brass, the Greek Empire. Why 4 heads for this leopard? Well, after Alexander the Great, he didn't have a son who he gave the kingdom to. And so the kingdom was divided into his 4 generals. All right? So the 4 heads to the leopard. But after the leopard comes a beast that we can't recognize. A great and dreadful beast with teeth of iron, which remind us of the iron legs of Rome. But it also has claws of brass, because that reminds us of the belly and thighs of brass of the Greek Empire. This Greco-Roman, but ultimately Roman beast treads down those who try to worship the true God, and does so for many, many years. So in Daniel 7, we have a beast that depicts the legs of iron of Rome. But we ask this question, what are these legs then? Why 2 legs? Well, what happened to the Roman Empire, and many of you will know this well, is that the Roman Empire split. It didn't stay as one great empire. It actually became 2. It split in half. It was so enormous it became Western Rome and Eastern Rome. Think of the legs of the image. There were 2 legs. If you like, a Western leg and an Eastern leg. And when we come to the book of Revelation, we're shown more beasts. And sometimes we can get a real pickle and think, what's this about? Well, you just have to remember the image and Daniel chapter 7. And the beasts show us different phases of the Roman Empire. The beasts are Roman. Many of them have got 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast in Daniel 7 had 10 horns. This is a Roman beast. And when we come to the book of Revelation, we're given detail, hundreds of years before it happened, of Rome splitting, and actually the eastern leg, which you can see on the screen there, becoming the political center of the Roman Empire. And actually the eastern leg, or the eastern side, gave power in Revelation 13 to the beast side of the Roman Empire, the religious side. Now, there was a particularly famous emperor who set up the capital of the eastern leg. And he set it up in what we now know as Constantinople. So I wonder if there are any children, young people, who can tell us what they think the name of the emperor was who set up the capital of Constantinople. Can you have a guess? Come on, Abs. Constantine, that's excellent, well done. So that's why it's called Constantinople, because he thought, do you know what shall I call this? I think I'm going to call it after me, Constantinople, right? So that's what we see in these 2 legs of iron. We see, just a dead easy map for us, a western leg and an eastern leg. And that eastern leg, the eastern side of the Roman Empire, became known as the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire lasted for much longer than the western leg, because Western Rome fell, and it fell in the year 476 AD. And it fell to many groups of people. They were known as the barbarians. They were no more barbaric than the Romans, but the Romans called them the barbarians. And the barbarians were people like the Huns and the Goths and the Ostrogoths. Young people, have any of you read Asterix? You should do, because Auntie Marg, yes, you well done. Yeah. Well, there we are. So I must be classified with the old people then, because this is where John and I learned history as kids, okay? So read a bit of Asterix. You see there the time of the Gauls. So Asterix the Gaul, this is obviously a silly story, but it's at the time of the Roman Empire when Western Rome is being broken up. So that's the time when we start to see something of the iron and the clay. So this is in the Christadelphian, this is a Bible commentator, and he says, the Roman Empire branched into 10 kingdoms as the toes of those feet. Some were weak as clay, others were strong as iron. Isaac Newton, a terrific Bible student, no less, said, who understands the Roman Empire to be part into to the 10 kingdoms, explains the clay mixture as the blending of barbarous nations with Rome by intermarriages and alliance, in which there was no stable amalgamation, though the 10 kingdoms retained much of Rome's strength. So it wasn't all clay, was it? It was iron, there's Rome in there, and clay. Or another commentator, the mingling with the seed of men, Daniel 2 verse 44, seems to be the blending of the Christianized Roman Empire with pagan nations, a deterioration being the result. So, what year did Western Rome fall? Can anyone remember? 476. So, 476, Western Rome. But we said, didn't we, that the Eastern leg actually lasted a lot longer. The Eastern Byzantine Empire went on for hundreds more years, until in the East another religion and power started to rise. And the religion was Islam, and then the power that started to take over the Byzantine Christianized empire in the East was the Ottoman Turk. It might be known as the Turkish Empire, or historically it was called the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire took over the Christianized Byzantine Empire, including the capital. What was the capital called in the East? What was it called? Help me out. I need some of these children to tell me. What was the capital called? Come on. Constantinople. So the next question is, well, what year does Constantinople fall? So Rome fell in the West in 476, but hundreds of years later, Constantinople lasted, but then it fell in the year 1453. So let's check that. We're right. 1453. Now, the terrific thing is me is I can see the next slide, so that's how I know I'm right, okay? So, 1453, Constantinople falls. And what happens to Rome? And you might be asking the question to yourself, Pete, what has any of this got to do with Russia and Iran? And this is in Bible prophecy. You're telling us a dream, and well, yes, it seems remarkable that this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had was obviously a prophecy about what was going to happen in the world. But all the same, what's this got to do with Russia and Iran? Well, here's the deal. When Constantinople fell in 1453, Christianized Rome crumbled. And so Christianity, and we call it Christianity because they weren't true Bible believers, but Christianity looked for another home. And they looked, well, they went in the West, you had something that certainly was never going to be able to be an empire again. And so they looked north, south, east, west, and actually it was Moscow that became, as it were, the third Rome. So this isn't anything to do with Christadelphians. This is secular history. Why do Russians call Moscow the third Rome? So you can read about a monk in the 1500s that said 2 Romes fell. So that, of course, was Rome and then Constantinople, and there will not be a fourth one. So let's just read the bold there. Constantinople became the second Rome, the capital of the truly Christian world. But after that, in 1453, I'm jumping to down here, the Ottoman Empire conquered Constantinople, weakened by political crisis, and renamed it Istanbul. So if you go to Turkey today, it's called Istanbul, isn't it? Moscow, which in the 15th to the 16th centuries gathered around itself the fragmented Russian lands, became the main Orthodox Christian capital. So you can go today to the Hagia Sophia, which is now being designated as a mosque. It was a Christian cathedral for hundreds of years, 1,000 years or so, and then that was changed to become a mosque by the Ottomans, and then at the beginning of the 1900s it became a museum, and then President Erdogan, the Turkish president, just in the last few years said, no, it's not going to be a museum, it's going to be a mosque again. And so the Hagia Sophia, you can go there and you can see hanging on the walls there this picture, an ancient picture showing the three Romes of Rome, Constantinople and Moscow. Well, with that in our minds, we're interested then to see headlines like this over the last few years. This is actually going back to Trump's first presidency, but what I want you to notice is how Putin is described in the headline. Putin is Caesar now. So does that make you start thinking of Rome and the Roman Empire? Well, here's another headline. Putin follows a long tradition of enlightened autocrats like the Tsars. Now, the Russian Tsar is from this idea of Caesar. Yeah, that's what the Tsar is. Putin the Tsar is more dangerous than ever. Vladimir Putin will be the Tsar of all the Russians for another decade or more. That was, again, a few years ago. Do you remember when Putin changed the constitution in Russia to ensure that he wasn't going to leave office, but he was going to stay there until, I think, 2033 is when it officially ends. But I think we can be confident that if he's still there in 2033 and the Lord Jesus hasn't come back, he's likely to be there for a bit longer after that too. Right? Because he's like the Caesar. That's how he acts. And so Russia today is, if you like, this eastern leg of that image of Daniel chapter 2. And we believe, as Christadelphians, and have done for as long as we've been called Christadelphians. I mean, someone like John Thomas was writing in the 1850s and saying that he believed from his understanding of Bible prophecy that Russia is going to drop down into Israel, onto the mountains of Israel, as we saw in Ezekiel 38, and that the image of Nebuchadnezzar is that image that you've got Eastern and Western coming together. So here we are. Here's the image of Nebuchadnezzar. One leg in the west in Rome and one in the east in Constantinople. And we're interested to see that the Russian flag has got the double-headed eagle, the symbol of empire. It's associated with its use of the Roman, the Byzantine Empire. It represented the empire's dominion over the Near East and the West. So the Russian flag is just a tiny clue in Bible prophecy that we expect at some stage Russia to drop down into Constantinople, that eastern leg, to come sweeping on down into Israel. You think, oh no, come on. Well, what about headlines like this? Putin's imperial ambitions could include Turkey. Now, look at this. This is from 2023, but just read that article. While Turkey was still recovering from that, you remember that awful earthquake that happened in Turkey and Syria a couple of years ago. This Russian politician said, Turkey is the historical lands of Russia. Turkey is now in dire situation. Let's take advantage of this, return our lands, let's squeeze it out of the Central Asia, undermine its influence in Ukraine, drive it out of the South Caucasus, raise certain forces in Turkey, and return what historically belonged to us, Constantinople, the eastern capital. He went on as far as to suggest that the crisis in Turkey must end up in its collapse, and in Russia's return to Istanbul, he said, we'll need to erect a cross over the church, he describes it, even though at that point it had been changed to a mosque, over the church of Hagia Sophia. So the Hagia Sophia, which is where you see that picture of the three Romes, that's the sort of central capital, as it were, of the Eastern Orthodox Church. He says, we need to put the Christian cross back there. Now, I want you to note that for a second. So this was said just a couple of years ago by a Russian politician. He says he wants Russia to come down and to erect that Russian cross, that Eastern Orthodox cross, over the church, he calls it, of Hagia Sophia. Now, what did John Thomas write? That Christadelphian I've referred to over 170 years ago. He says that Russia is going to come down into Constantinople. Just read that. Having fulfilled the mission, so he's now saying once Russia's done that, the mission of his sacred Russia to put down rebellion, look what he says. To plant the Greek, that's the Eastern Church's cross, on the dome of St. Sophia, to prostrate Europe at his feet. He'll next address himself to the work of establishing his dominion over the rest. Now, you might think, well, this politician's crazy saying that. This is what Christadelphians said 170 years ago they thought would happen at some stage. That politician's practically quoting John Thomas. It's amazing, isn't it? Now, you've got your Bibles open in Daniel. I want you to come a few chapters on to chapter 11. Because in chapter 11, you read a chapter which is notoriously complex and detailed. And it's brilliant. It's so brilliant, in fact, that there are many critics of the Bible that would say this must have been written years after its time. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in Qumran in 1947, they were able to demonstrate that the book of Daniel, they found Daniel as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, was written hundreds of years before any of these things happened. So we can be confident that the things we read of here, they've not been written retrospectively. They were written hundreds of years before their time. The reason critics said it's rubbish is because everything written happened until verse 40. But we can be absolutely confident that this is going to happen because the others have happened. At the time of the end, we read, shall the king of the south attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. So we read about two great powers at the time of the end, a king of the north and a king of the south. In fact, Daniel 11 describes all the way through the chapter of these two powers, the king of the north, the king of the south. The king of the north was one of, do you remember how many heads the leopard had? Children, can I ask you, do you remember I told you in Daniel 7? Go on, shout it out. 4 heads. What, can you remember why I said there were 4 heads? Because there was a great Greek king. What was the great Greek king's name?
Constantine.
That's a good try, but actually it's not Constantine. The great Greek king, someone the great. Come on, boys upstairs, tell me. Alexander the Great, super. But we said, didn't we, that after Alexander the Great, he didn't have a son for his empire to go to. And so it was split for his 4 generals. And they were Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy in the north. He became the king of the north, rather in the south, and Seleucid in the north. And so the king of the north was the Seleucid Empire. Look, here we are. We can see here the purple. And the king of the south, the Ptolemaic Empire, in here down in the south. South of what? North of what? The land of Israel. That's the center of Bible prophecy. So we read of these 2 great powers, the king of the north, the king of the south. But the king of the north, you see, we're told in Daniel 11, is going to sweep down all the way, verse 41 of Daniel chapter 11, into the glorious land. Now, in the Bible, what do you think the glorious land is? Children, tell me, young people, what's the glorious land? What's the glorious land in the Bible? The land of Israel. The king of the north is going to come into the land of Israel until we're told that some stage he's going to plant his tents, verse 45, of his palace between the seas. So What's the sea on the west? Young people, again, I want you to tell me, what's the sea on the west of Israel? Don't look at the screen. If you look at the screen, you'll know the answer immediately. Sorry? What's the sea? Go on, shout it out. The Mediterranean. Great. So what must the sea be on the east? And it's not the Red Sea here. It's a sea in the middle. And it's not got, it's a bit salty, if I'm honest. Excellent. Well done. The Dead Sea. So the king of the north is going to set up his kingdom. He's going to put his flag down, as it were, and say, this is mine, between the seas. And there's a particular city between those seas, the eternal city, the city of, go on, Jerusalem. So the king of the north is going to set up camp there. That's what we're told in Daniel chapter 11. Now, Daniel 11 is one of those brilliant chapters that we can see as paired almost, as it were, with another chapter, the chapter that we read together in Ezekiel. So you're in Daniel, go back a book, and I want you to come back to Ezekiel. And I'm going to show you on the screen here. And young people, I can see many of you are taking some excellent notes, which I think is brilliant. I'm going to go a bit fast for you to take these notes, so you can come up and take them afterwards, okay? But I want you to be confident that when I tell you that Daniel 11 and Ezekiel 38 at the time of the end are talking about the same thing, we can see from the strength of the textual links between the chapters that we're right. Ezekiel 38 and Daniel 11 are talking about the same time. Look, so there's a table of links. Look, from the north at the last days, like a storm or a whirlwind, you're going to come against Israel. Let's go for a couple more here. Some nations are with him, described in Daniel 11 as the Ethiopians, the Libyans. Here we are, the same group of nations in Ezekiel 38. They're going to come to take a spoil, and ultimately they're going to be judged, and they won't make it. So in Ezekiel 38, are you there now? We start off, and we read in the first 5 verses together, of a group of nations. They are Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. Well, you might think, who are they? Who's Gog of the land of Magog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal? Well, let's see who's with them. With them, verse 5, will be Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya. Well, Ethiopia and Libya, they were also in Daniel 11, and they're those North African states that currently are very friendly with Russia. What about Persia? What's the name we call Persia today? Come on. Iran, that's right. So we started off, didn't we, saying that the world is looking at this Russia-Iran axis and saying it needs to be addressed. Well, the Bible says at the time of the end that Persia, or it's called Iran now since 1979, Iran will be with, now let's go back to verse 2, Russia. Now, Rosh, or Magog, Gog, the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh. Rosh sounds a bit like Russia, doesn't it? Now, that's not good enough evidence on it in its own, is it? Saying, oh, that sounds like that. But the Rus, you've heard a lot about recently. Why have you heard a lot about the Rus in the last few years? Which nation is Russia currently at war with, young people? Which nation is Russia currently at war with? Ukraine. And one of the justifications that Putin uses for his war with Ukraine is to say, you are my people. You should be with me. You shouldn't be with Europe. You should be with me. You're the Rus, the Kievan Rus, as they were called in ancient times. You're with me. And so in Ezekiel 38, we see this group of nations at the beginning of the chapter, and they are the group that in Daniel 11 is described as the king of the north. We might call them the Northern Alliance. And they're going to come down, we read together, didn't we, in verse 8, against the mountains of Israel. But there'll be another group of nations. Let's call them the Southern Alliance. We're not looking at them this morning, but we see them in verse 13. Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish. Tarshish is Britain. Sheba and Dedan are the Gulf nations. So we wouldn't be surprised to see relationships developing between Tarshish and Sheba and Dedan, the Gulf nations. You look at the news. That's what you're seeing at the moment. But our subject today, this morning, is about Russia and Iran. So let's unpick verse 2 a bit. The land of Magog. Well, the Magogite territory, we're told by scholars from the 1st century, so 2,000-year-old historians say that the Gog and Magogite territory was, at the time of Alexander the Great, so the time of that brass empire, so before the legs of iron, barbarians, the far north, behind the Caucasus Mountains with iron gates. This gate situated in Georgia, near the Russian borders. So can you see that in ancient times they said that Magog, Gog, they were from the far north? Well, that's what it says in Ezekiel 38 and Daniel 11. What else? Well, the Greeks called the Magogite Scythians. And Herodotus, a historian really at about the time of Ezekiel, he suggests, and here's his map, well, it's not his map, but here's a drawing from a map that he put together, is to say the Scythian territory went from sort of right through Germany, the Danube, that red line on the left, right across into Russian lands. A region, Gesenius, a Bible scholar at the time of John Thomas in the 1800s, says, a great and powerful people of the same Magogite name, inhabiting the extreme recesses of the north. That they were called the Scythians. So we can identify this territory, all right? This territory we believe to be Russia. And we've always believed it to be Russia. It's not a question of thinking, well, I bet you're saying that now because Russia's so aggressive at the moment. This is what we've believed since the 1800s. Bible students for hundreds and hundreds of years have understood this to be Russia, who's going to become confederate in the last days with, verse 5, number one nation, Iran. Isn't it amazing that we're living at a time when we're seeing Russia and Iran tighten their relationship? The Gaza war brings Russia and Iran closer than ever. And I think this is an amazing article that's a couple of years old now, but I want to share it again. The latest Gaza war, this commentator says, is more than just another bloody round of the endless conflict between Israel and Hamas. The fighting is a product of a shifting Middle East. New alliances are transforming the politics of the region. Although, listen, at the time, the Biden administration and other allies of Israel have been promoting the Israeli-Saudi normalization. So Saudi, of course, would be the king of the South Territory. Look, verse 13 of Ezekiel 38, Sheba, Dedan, the merchant. So you've got that alliance. But look what it says. A counterforce is already in the works, deepening ties between Iran, verse 5, and Russia, verse 2. So isn't that amazing that commentators are noticing that the world is being organized into two great players? We might call them the king of the north and the king of the south. That's what's happening right now in the world. Let me show you more. This is a paper that's been put together by an American economic think tank who are trying to understand and help government with the evolving Russia-Iran relationship. Iran's 12-day war, that war it had with Israel, which was particularly, of course, in Iran, has only boosted its cooperation with Russia. Snapback sanctions are deepening the Iran-Russia alignment. Just the last couple of weeks, Russia met with Iranian nuclear experts in second secret visit, the Financial Times reports. Iran-Russia military cooperation progressing according to plans. Iran-Russia signed cooperation memorandum on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Just this last week, December the 4th, Russia receives enhanced Shahed drones from Iran. Russia is building these fighter jets for Iran. Secret files reveal the numbers and delivery timeline. And yet, we're interested to see headlines like this also in the last week. So the Russia-Iran one, well, it's become so commonplace now that, well, it's almost got boring. Tell me something new. Magog with Persia at the time. Yeah, fair enough. But what we're now seeing, just this week, headlines like this. Why a war with Europe has never looked so tempting to Putin. If Europe wants to start a war, we're ready now, Russia's Putin says. Putin warns Europe. If you want war, Russia will defeat you. After Putin's chilling threat, is Europe ready for war with Russia? So all the time, we wonder what's happening here. But don't forget, the two legs of the image have got to stand up. That's what happens when the stone hits. Do you know, John Thomas wrote a little booklet called Russia Triumphant, Europe Chained. We might think and sit here in our comfy homes or in this hall and think everything's fine. You've seen the headlines the last couple of weeks. What are they doing in France? Military service is back. Talking about conscription. This week, it's Germany. European nations are frightened. They're nervous. NATO isn't what it once was. All of these things make people worried across the world. But we are confident as Bible students that we know ultimately what will happen. Let me show you a few more headlines, if I may. Ukraine war latest. Russia using peace talks as cover to capture more land. Now, when we read something like that, that should ring a bell to us. You're in Ezekiel. I'd like you to come with me back to Daniel. Come with me. Keep a marker here if you like, but it's not difficult to find it again. But come with me to Daniel, and this time to chapter 8. In Daniel chapter 8, well, it's a terrific chapter. We read about more animals and beasts. We read, it starts off with a ram with two horns. And the ram with two horns, we learn, is the Medo-Persian Empire. And against the Medo-Persian Empire, after the chest and arms of silver, children, what came next after the chest and arms of silver? After the Medes and Persians, the belly and thighs of brass. What are the belly and thighs of brass? The Greeks. In Daniel 7, it was the leopard with 4 heads. In Daniel 8, it's a goat with a notable horn. Because the notable horn, we're told, is the great king, Alexander the Great. And so Daniel 8 speaks to us about the eastern leg, as it were. Daniel 7 deals with the western leg. Daniel 8 with the eastern leg. And at the time of the end, we're told, so if you're Daniel 8 now, verse 23, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He'll destroy fearfully, just prosper and thrive. He'll destroy the mighty and also the holy people. He's going to come down against the land of Israel. But through his cunning, he'll cause deceit to prosper under his rule. He shall exalt himself in his heart. He'll destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes. He shall be broken without human means. So this fierce king, we believe to be the king of the north. At the moment, that's Putin. If time goes on, that person could change. But the king of fierce countenance is going to be destroyed, despite the fact that he's going to come against the people of Israel. But he exalts himself in his heart. He's cunning in deceit. He's able to create a pseudo-peace, as it were. Russia using peace talks as cover. Isn't it amazing? By peace, we're told in Daniel 8, he'll destroy many. Now, we might ask ourselves the question, well, why is Russia? Yes, we're told at the end of verse 24, Russia's going to destroy the mighty and the holy people. Yes, we're told in Ezekiel 38, Gog is going to come down onto the mountains of Israel. You know, why? It's not hard, is it, to reflect why Iran might want to. We've seen those Iranian proxy groups of the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, fighting against Israel for as long as Israel have been there, really. They don't want Israel there. Iran will openly say in the United Nations, Israel needs to be cut off. So we're not surprised to see the motive of Iran. We're told in Ezekiel 38 they'll come for a spoil. We wonder if there's perhaps energy in the Mediterranean that Russia won't want Israel to export. I'm sure that may be. They may come up with a reason. But you can understand, can't you, in the world at the moment, that nations are turning against Israel. In fact, The Economist said this week, many Israelis believe another war with Iran is coming. And they're right, because it is coming. And Iran, despite being on its knees, despite being a pariah state internationally, as Russia is in many respects, they are going to join together with North African nations, and ultimately many other nations will join them. And they are going to come down onto the mountains of Israel. And we ask ourselves, how are they going to do that? What is it that's going to motivate these nations? Well, what do we all see in the world at the moment? Exponentially rising. It's an attitude and a mindset against Israel. Being discussed continually in parliaments across the world is this problem of anti-Semitism. Look at this article. This professor, this academic, presented to the European Parliament in just less than a month ago, just two weeks or so ago. He said this. So this is to the European Parliament. Europe's universities are becoming morally required to hate Jews. He says we're living in a time of normalized Jew hatred. In this society, on this continent, it's become morally required to hate Jews. You want to get a degree at a university? You want to get a good position in a proper media outlet? It's morally required to demonstrate your hate for the existence of the self-determination of the Jewish people. That's the world we live in. Listen, people in workplaces hardly dare whisper that they would support Israel. Did you notice when you drove into Mumbles this morning? When you leave Mumbles today, I want you, as you just go past Newton Road, to look up on the left. You'll see an enormous banner against Israel. It's morally required today. You can see anti-Semitism rising and rising. 80% of European Jewish leaders feel less safe than before October the 7th. And all the while, Israel, in increasing isolation, keeps, despite international condemnation, building on the mountains. Now, you're in Daniel. Come with me back to Ezekiel. And I want you to stop at Ezekiel 38. So I want you to be reminded of when Gog comes down, when Russia, confederate with Iran, comes down, when they come into Israel, it doesn't just say they come to the land of Israel, it tells you where. So, verse 8, after many years you'll be visited. So this is Gog. You're going to be part of Bible prophecy in many years. In the latter years, you'll come into the land of those who've been brought back from the sword, gathered from many people. This is the Jewish people. You're going to come onto the mountains of Israel. Now, what are these mountains? Well, come back to chapter 36. And in chapter 36, we have a prophecy particularly about the mountains of Israel. And the mountains of Israel, I'll show you a map shortly, is simply what we call today the West Bank. It's the mountainous ridge that runs to the west of the Jordan River, that runs right down through to Jerusalem. And they're building, aren't they? Despite the United Nations and other nations furious, the likes of Britain are furious. Stop building! It's not your land. The United Nations gave a partition plan in 1947 after the Second World War, and the land was divided up, and the Palestinians were having the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights, and the others besides. This is not your land. Because you know what happened? There have been wars against Israel that the Arab neighbors have brought against them, and Israel have won every time, against all odds. Why? Because God has said they're going to be in that land at the time of the end. In fact, they're not going to just be in that land. They're going to have the mountains. the West Bank today. They took it in 1967, remember the 6-Day War? But the international community is furious and says, give that back. You can't keep building on there. But they do keep building. What did the Bible say is going to happen at the time of the end? Verse 8 of Ezekiel 36. But you, O mountains of Israel, you shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel, for they're about to come. I'm for you. I'll turn to you. You shall be tilled and sown. I will multiply upon you men, all the house of Israel, all of it. The cities will be inhabited, the ruins rebuilt. I will multiply upon you, man and beast. They'll increase and bear fruit. I will make you inhabited as in former times. I will cause men to walk on you. Verse 12. My people Israel, they shall take possession of you, and you will be in their inheritance. Have no doubt about it. The Jewish state will ultimately have the West Bank. Now, how much of that we will see before the Lord Jesus comes back, we don't know. But we are told very clearly it's for Israel. And so that's why we're not surprised to see as soon as the Jews in 1967 took the West Bank, they built. They're fulfilling, many of them don't know it, many of them do know it. They're fulfilling Bible prophecy. And so we're seeing headlines like this. West Bank population increases by 15% in 5 years. Israeli settlements expand by record amount. The UN rights chief says in indignation. Here's the mountains of Israel. Here's the West Bank. And Russia and Iran and Confederate nations are going to come against them. In just the last couple of months, the Palestinians and the UN have criticized what an anti-settlement watchdog says is Israel's largest seizure of land in the occupied West Bank in more than 3 decades. The size of the area designated of declaration is the largest since the Oslo Accords. They're not happy. Israel launches new military operation in northern West Bank. That's just a couple of weeks ago. Israel seeks to seize 1.8 million square meters of land in occupied West Bank. The real reason Israel is launching yet another military operation in northern West Bank is they're saying because they want to get ground troops in there to take more of the land. Netanyahu era sees 40% surge in settlements in occupied West Bank. Listen, this is Ezekiel 36. I haven't found one headline here to show you, to convince you, to say, oh, I found someone that says this. Everybody says it. Every news outlet across the world tells you that Ezekiel 36 is happening. France, Germany, Italy, UK call on Israel to abide by international law, protecting Palestinians on the West Bank. You see, I believe at the time of the end that the issue of anti-Semitism will get so strong and the Jewish people continuing to build on the West Bank that the likes of Russia and Europe will be able to put their differences aside, to come together ultimately, for the image to stand on both feet, to come marching down onto the mountains of Israel. They are furious by what they see. We expect at some stage, and I should be clear, that as Christadelphians, we don't think this is the end. Remember what happens to the image. A stone hits the image, breaks it up, and becomes a mountain which fills the land of Israel and ultimately the whole earth. That stone is the Lord Jesus Christ with those who are faithful to him. And they will form a government from Jerusalem, from the mountains. And that government will grow and grow until ultimately it fills the whole earth. And you can be part of that. But today, you have to be confident that you put aside the bias that we see through the world in the media today. You stick to the truth of the Bible and you put your trust in this God. And if you do that, you can share in the blessings. I've quoted John Thomas, that Christadelphian from 170 years ago. And I quote him because I want you to know that we're not making this up today. This is what true Bible students have always believed is going to happen. He said this in 1849. The future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times. They're predicted in the scriptures of truth. The Russian autocracy in its plenitude, on the verge of its dissolution, is the image of Nebuchadnezzar. It's the two legs of the image standing on the mountains of Israel, ready to be smitten by the stone. When Russia makes its grand move for the build-up of its image empire, let the reader know that the end of all things as at present constituted is at hand. And so we say, you have a choice. Ultimately, what happens to Russia, Iran, Gog of the land of Magog, Persia, and confederate nations? They'll be broken to pieces and become like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. That's you and me. If we don't choose to do something in our lives today to align ourselves, not with any political party. No one can fix it. Align yourself with the stone, the Lord Jesus Christ. He said, didn't he? The wise man built his house on a rock. Be a wise man. Keep looking. Know that there are these signs. The Lord Jesus says, when these things begin to come to pass, look up, lift up your heads. Your redemption draws near.
Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.